audio. We're gonna go on mute. And we are now recording.
Okay, so shall we begin with the pledge of allegiance?
We shall.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let it be noted, Commissioner Mateo has joined us. Roll call. We have a roll call.
Yeah, so roll call, Commissioner Monet,
Present.
Commissioner Block,
Present.
Commissioner Laguna,
Present.
Commissioner Mitten Rodriguez,
Present.
and Commissioner Keller.
Present. Let it be noted, we are all here. Do you have any public comment or comments? Yes.
Before we go ahead and do that, let me go ahead and. Good timing. Let me go ahead and just read the public comment. Speaker instructions. So spoken public comments will be accepted in the meeting in person or remotely through Zoom. Public comments in person will be taken first, followed by speakers on Zoom. You will be called on by name to speak when it's your turn. If you wish to speak to the commission, please fill out a speaker slip located near the conference room door. If you have anything that you wish to distribute to the commission and include it in the official record, please hand it to the staff person for the Parks Department, who will distribute the information to the commission members and staff. For speakers on Zoom, please use the raise hand function to indicate you would like to speak for an item. When the chair calls on public comment, click on raised hand. Speakers will be notified shortly before they are called to speak. You will be provided the ability to unmute your microphone and begin speaking. Public comment is limited to 2 minutes. All right, so we do have one public comment here in the room, and that'd be Steve Kennedy.
Thank you, Nick. This is the video footage you requested. I'd like to go back on the agenda under new business and for consideration and approval of this video project. Here's our trip.
No, we're not gonna show video.
But that's.
I don't think, Mr. Kennedy, that's, so
This is my presentation. I'll show you before and after.
I'm gonna, is it 2 minutes?
Yes.
I'm gonna defer to council as to whether that's allowed.
California a few years ago.
I'm gonna let it go for 2 minutes. See the time we're going.
Portion of the script of the elementary school version of the Cannonball Express 2018. The full script can be found on www.cannonball.org. It is spelled funny, single N, single L, Cannonball. From this casual conversation emerged an earnest effort to make their neighborhood fire resilient and earn some pocket money. In later scenes, Carl will get some great advice and a handmade magic wand from Merlin the technician, while Ingrid will be mentored by Muriel the housewife and purchase a drone.
Drop from the ceiling. I heard the monks of the Zoom are smelled with smoke and quicker than dry lightning set pumps lit up on this quick brush. So they saved the temple and let it come to me.
Technical difficulties.
Well, this video is to gently encourage kids in grade 4 through 6 to enter the training and education pipeline for the jobs of tomorrow. This will help us prevent, prepare for, and mitigate the kind of fire that hit Paradise, California a few years ago and Lahaina, Maui recently. This trailer was made from a portion of the script of the elementary school version of the Cannonball Express 2018. The full script can be found on www.cannonball.org. It is spelled funny, single N, single L, Cannonball. From this casual conversation emerged an earnest effort to make their neighborhood fire resilient and earn some pocket money. In later scenes, Carl will get some great advice and a handmade magic wand from Merlin the technician, while Ingrid will be mentored by Muriel, the housewife, and purchase a drone.
Story about Carl and Ingrid.
And good, remember how hot and smoky it was last November after the fires? I was expecting an oxygen mask shot from the ceiling. I heard the monks at the zone are smelled with smoke and quicker than dry lightning set pumps lit up hoses to the bus. So they saved the temple and the outbuilding.
Mr. Kennedy, that's 2
Fun
minutes.
when I go out. Won't be as much fun as launching model rockets, but at least I'll get to sleep in. Well, thanks to the hill will talk to me.
Are there any public comment from Zoom? No public comment from Zoom.
Then we could proceed on to the next item. Could I get a motion, set the agenda?
I'll make a motion that the agenda is set for April 4th, 2024. I'll second.
Motion made and seconded, vote.
You wanna, I take
Say
no roll
aye.
call. Yeah. I don't think a roll call is necessary.
No, we're not doing a roll call, just say aye.
All those
Aye.
in favor, aye?
Right,
Any opposed?
okay,
There.
department update,
So the department update was provided in the packet. A couple issues to raise to the attention. So we were able to provide our 2023 visitor numbers, so we came in just about 2.5 million visitors. Which is about 500,000 lower than, it's about 400,000 lower than what we typically serve, say, since the pandemic. With that said, when you look at the impacts we had in the first quarter, the amount of time Coyote Point was closed because of the transformer, and then the bridge at Coyote Point at Fitzgerald Marine Reserve being out for 11 months, we were pretty happy with those figures, actually. But we're continuing to collect data. One thing I think is interesting is that we're seeing an increase in user errant visitor numbers at some of our parks, specifically San Bruno Mountain, San Pedro Valley, Junipero Cerro Park. A lot of the North County parks are seeing they saw a significant increase during the pandemic, and they've been able to sustain that increase more so than other areas in the park system. So we're very happy about that. And it's gonna, because it's a sustained trend, we're gonna have to really kind of rethink in future years how we want to go about providing services at those locations. A couple of our big projects are hitting really important milestones. So Flood Park, on Monday, actually, we will do kind of like a soft closure. So that Parks Department can go into Flood Park and start removing a lot of the table boards and some of the other features, split rail, stuff like that we can reuse in other parks. There will be more of a full firm closure, or almost a full closure, on the 15th, so the following week, when Jensen Landscape will get into the park and really start the real demolition work, the clearing and grubbing, and start prepping all the locations for construction of the new amenities. During construction, the pump track will remain open as much as possible. A few things are gonna be occurring this year that will require a closure. First is that we need to seal it. So several months after you build it and you let everything cure, you have to go back and seal it. And so we're probably gonna be doing that in the next week or two. And then when we start building the northern section of the parking lot, which is immediately adjacent to the pump track, we're gonna have to close the track at that point, because construction activity will just be occurring all around it. And so there have been some concerns expressed about keeping that track open. From my perspective, we put $500,000 into building what has become an extremely popular feature. People from other counties are coming to use it. People from other parts of our county are coming to use it. I don't think we can close it for 8 months, 9 months, right? That doesn't make sense to me. And so we're gonna be keeping that open as much as we possibly can. And again, we recognize that there'll be times we have to close it, but for the most part, it will remain open. And then Tunitas Creek Beach, Tunitas Creek Beach, we're back on site, just getting ready for, we're hoping that today was kind of it. Knock on wood, and there's a step phase when I'll be like, no, this is it, and they're like, why would you say that? It's gonna rain tomorrow now.
Yes.
But yeah, I know. So, yeah, but so we're just getting on site, kind of getting ready for the soil to dry out, and then what we'll be doing is just finishing some of the grading work before we can then jump into construction. We are now looking at this, September timeframe, so we've been bumped back about 6 weeks for our opening. I suspect we'll probably end up having to do another bump back from September to October, before the opening, but we're still looking at 2024, so we're happy about that. Another really fun project that we have on the horizons is the Pescadero Community Space or Pescadero Plaza project. You may see it referred to, and this is one where the county back in 2022 purchased an undeveloped parcel kind of at the gateway of the Pescadero community, and we are going to be working to make that a community space. There's a phenomenal steering committee down in the community that has done great work, really kind of promoting this project and kind of re-engaging with the community about the use and making sure everyone's on the same page. And I would say in that community more than any other, the importance of us being able to work with community leaders cannot be overstated. And we are fortunate to have one of those community leaders on our commission. And so Irma, I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that. I mean, you've really been taking a great lead in that effort and making sure the community's, really part of the conversation. And so we look forward to working with that steering committee. But I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add for that project.
I think what I would add is, yes, the community is really engaged, really widely engaged. We've made an effort to make sure all stakeholder groups are already understand the project. And I think it's a really good opportunity for more dialogue with parks, just figure out how parks work, because we do have other big parks in the region. So we're hoping that, that it becomes a sustained relationship that we enhance between county parks and the community. But yeah, we're ready to go, just leveraging, supporting staff as much as we can.
And I think this is an exciting project for us. This is the first time we're gonna go about a project of this type. So this is, we have smaller community parks like Moss Beach Playground or Friendship Park, but that's very different than what at least we've been discussing to date with this project. So I don't know what this project's gonna look like. All I can tell you is it's gonna be very different than anything we've done in the past. But it's also gonna be pretty awesome. Like I just, I think we've had a lot of really exciting conversations. And I think it's gonna be great for that community. And so I'm just excited to be able for us to be a part of it. And we've been fortunate to get $2 million from the state to take that through the process. And then we've also received $1 million from Kevin. We talked about this at the last commission meeting, $1 million from Kevin Mullen in federal funding to be able to replace the Magic Mountain Playground at Coyote Point. And that's something that we're trying to figure out what those next steps are. The federal government hasn't provided the funding obligations on that yet. And so we are waiting for that. But in the meantime, we're gonna get going on community engagement and start really soliciting feedback on what the community would like to see there. I think that site is so unique, not just because of its location, but because of its topography. So if you recall kind of seeing it, it might have been a little bit hard because we had some distance between us, but the site is actually 2-tier. And so that lends itself for some really creative playground features. And so we're very excited about that. And so we'll be starting that process here very shortly. And then Chair Kelly, would you like to have me go through kind of a summary just for anyone who's on about what the last meeting was, you know,
I
the
think
walking
that would
tour.
be great.
Okay.
That would be great.
So we had a really, what I thought was positive walking tour, excuse me, of Coyote Point at the last meeting. I love that that was our, you know, that was really kind of our first one in a long time, but I think we're gonna set ourselves off for a fun trend here. And we had a chance to talk about the revitalized Coyote Point effort, and we looked at the 5 zones. So as we're, you know, the 5 zones of Coyote Point are the marsh, which is the water by the marina, the knoll, the great lawn, and the beach. And each has its own character. And what we're embarking on in the revitalized Coyote Point effort is figuring out how those individual zones come together to make one park, but then also serve as their own individual functions. And, you know, as part of that, we are exploring what the most appropriate use of the yacht club building would be. We are looking at the Magic Mountain Playground. And we know that there were a number of amenities and facilities that were damaged during the winter storms that need to be repaired and brought up to current expectations, I'll say. So very fun process. And we are gonna be taking a very different approach to this as we discussed. So instead of Flood Park where we did a whole landscape plan and we spent a decade getting to where we are, we're gonna take a very different approach that allows us to kind of incrementally make improvements as funding becomes available. And I think what we will see is that we can get improvements delivered for the public much sooner. And I think it will also allow us to kind of stay up with current trends in that approach as well. I think Flood Park was the right approach for that location, but it's 21 acres. Coyote Point is, you know, a couple hundred. So very different kind of beast in that regard. So that was the kind of a brief summary on our March meeting. And then, you know, other than that, I'm certainly happy to answer any questions the commission has on the report, or any other issues that you may have questions on.
So any comments from?
Commissioner? Yes. Thank you for the presentation, Director Calderon. I think it wouldn't hurt to, and he's my elected congressman in my district. I don't think it would hurt to send him a thank you. And was it part of, like, did Congressman Mullen stumble upon this, or was it within his boundaries or within an umbrella of, okay, we're gonna give county parks $1 million that just kind of floated through the tree and abracadabra, there you go? Or was it part of the federal funding that allocated money to our department?
Yeah, I wish it was as easy as that first one. So we had been told that Representative Kevin Mullen was taking requests for earmark funding. And we frankly, we put a very competitive application together in a matter of like a week. And worked with Connie Warrow-Sturl, who is our legislative director. Afterwards had some conversations with the city of San Mateo and the police athletic league there. So worked with their parks director and their chief of police, who really kind of collaborate to run that program. And we'll be partnering with them in engagement for this. And then it had to go through the whole process, and every step of the way we had to advocate for it, and Representative Mullen did a phenomenal job kind of making this a priority that at the end received, you know, $1 million in funding is
It's all federal money.
it's all federal money. And you know, I think when we put in for this, I was told, okay, you know, what do you think you need? And I said, well, you know, we could use $1 million. Right, I mean, why not? $1 million? No. So we said, like, you know, when you look at the cost of purchasing equipment and installing it, we could use $1 million. And they said, okay, well, let's put it in for $1 million, but expect that you're probably gonna get like 200,000. And I was like, well, listen, I'm not gonna pocket 200,000. So like, great, I'll take that too. And so the fact that he was able to deliver on $1 million is really remarkable. And I do know that the board sends a thank you letter, but I think you know, too often our public officials only hear the bad and never get an appreciation for the good. And so I certainly think he would appreciate hearing a thank you.
Any other questions, comments from fellow commissioners?
Actually related to that, right? And yes, $1 million is a lot of money, especially from a public entity to, you know, kind of get things going. is $1 million going to do it, or are there other funds that we're gonna have to pull from in order? Cause the Magic Mountain, I mean, it's awesome, but it's in disrepair as well, right? And I'm sure that we're not just gonna be replacing, we may also potentially start to, or try to do more stuff. So just wanted to get a sense as to how far that's gonna get us. Is that just for like sheer, like replacing the stuff that's broken down, and then are we gonna use other funding
Yeah,
like
explain where
Medicare?
that's gonna,
Yeah,
where that's
yeah, yeah.
gonna articulate through, you know?
Sam, I thought you were paying for the difference, no? So.
I can withdraw some from my retirement.
No, we don't need you to do that. No, so we actually set money aside in our budget, which you'll hear about today. So we set money aside in our Measure K funds for Coyote Point renovations. We knew that there were a lot of things that needed to happen at Coyote Point, between the yacht club building, between restoring the Harbor View and Eucalyptus picnic areas, with some of the improvements that we knew were gonna be needed to Magic Mountain, even if we didn't get this money, the Eucalyptus playground, right? So we knew there was a lot of things, there was a lot that needed to get done at Coyote Point, so we set aside about $1.5 million in Measure K funding for Coyote Point. And then we also have access to Quimbiac funds, which would be used for Coyote Point. And so we have some money that we're gonna use as that local match. Whether what we have in addition to that $1 million is enough, I think is yet to be seen. I think there's a lot of reason that I'm optimistic that we can get it done for that money. There's a lot of different ways of going about how you design and install a playground, and depends a lot on which process we use. But what I do know and what we're committed to doing is replacing that playground in full, right? So not just replacing the tower, so we're gonna replace that entire site in full. And we will do so with features that serve people of all ages and abilities. And that we will maintain that location as a destination. And so we are going to make that, a true regional park. And which it is right now, we're just gonna continue that and elevate it. But we want to be better about making sure we're serving people with both, physical and mental differences. And so that's gonna be core to our design process.
Any potential bidders or folks that you already have that have been in the, in the loop of things, or maybe a think tank that San Mateo County Parks has contacted, like a major company to work on this? Has that been in place, or it just anyone that wants to put a bid, like, you want the best contractor to work on your kitchen, your bathroom, your extending your home or something? Has there anyone been contacted from, local Bay Area companies that have the interest to work on, without cutting corners, to work on a beautification of Coyote Point?
Yeah, so the answer is no, and it's not because we don't want to, it's because we don't know what the funding obligations are for the federal dollars. So they may specify in the grant agreement how you go about procuring services, right? So a way, an expedited way of doing it is you work through what's called the CMAS, the California Multiple Awards Schedule. And that is an expedited process, and they go through a competitive process at the state level that we can tap into. But the federal dollars may not recognize that process as a competitive process, which means we would have to go out and do our own. So until we see what those guidelines are, it's hard for me. We can't really start those types of engagement. What we can do using our own money is community engagement. And that's what we're starting to structure, is what our community engagement process looks like.
Any other comments, questions?
Couple comments. One, I wanted to say what a pleasure it was to be on a field trip. Completely enjoyed getting out there on site. A, because it's fun, and B, it's so much more informative when we get to be there and see it firsthand. And so I just want to lend my total support to getting out to more places in person so we can see stuff, firsthand.
I'm glad you feel that way, cause that's on the agenda
Yeah.
today, but yeah, no.
I saw that, yeah.
And I appreciate everyone being able to, make that change for that meeting. I think it was extremely informative and helpful and frankly, probably good for all of our, physical and mental well-being, so.
It was fun, and you can see the group was livened up, so that was a lot of fun. Good thinking there and support that in the future. To get $1 million when you ask for $1 million is awesome, so congratulations. And, many thanks to everybody who played a role in that, and I like your idea there to send in other letters, just of support, because, if you thought it was meaningful for the commission here to have a letter signed from all of us, just gratitude, I'm sure we could do that. It'd be a nice thing.
So it's not a conflict of interest, is it, of meeting amongst us to say, to have each commissioner have a letterhead of or a warm regards letter to the congressman and say, hey, from all the commissioners from San Mateo Parks, we greatly appreciate, it's okay to do that.
So you can.
Is it
certainly-
okay to send a letter to the congressman?
It's absolutely okay to send a letter to a congressman. I think if you're contemplating all getting together and doing it, then you should do that in the context of a meeting.
Yeah.
But like you also can send individual letters.
Personal individual.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Maybe that's the thing to do, so we're not.
Yeah.
And
You can identify yourself as a member of the commission. You wouldn't be speaking on behalf of. the
No.
commission, But you can absolutely do that. Probably see that like letters to the editor on the paper, like those sorts of things.
Likewise, if there is a commissioner interested in leading and just drafting that letter, we could also agendize that in a future meeting just for adoption, and then, you all could sign it.
We've done that with some
Yeah,
things.
Yeah,
like
we've
that.
done something similar to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to remind my commissioner, fellow commissioners, that it's taken us half an hour to do this and we're not finished with it. I just wanna, sort of keep track on time. I do have some comments as well,
Okay.
but I'll wait.
No, I don't have comments, so go right ahead.
Yes, 2.5 million visitors, I think that's great. I think the last time I checked, the population of San Mateo County was 750,000 and stuff like that. I mean, so 2.5 million visitors in 2023, I think is a very, very impressive figure. The $1 million at echo, commissioner's comment is also extremely impressive, as well as the $2 million for the Pescadero Community Square. I just do have a couple of questions, but I don't necessarily want to have them answered here, by virtue of the amount of time that we do have. One, the Sam McDonald history hike, I don't know what that consists of. I would like to get some further information as to that. Cause I know there are people in East Palo Alto would be very interested.
Yeah.
In a history hike in the Sam McDonald Park. And then two, the workshop on March 16th in the Flood Park workshop.
Oh, yeah.
Any additional details about how that workshop went and and how broad the attendance was? Was it beyond just the Flood Park neighborhood as it has been in the past? So just, just some questions about who attended. And then on the Pescadero Community Space, we've got a $2 million thankfully. That's really, really nice. And the last statement you made is that no department funds have been appropriated to this project. So the expectation is that there's gonna be some funds appropriated in the future. Is that the expectation? Do you have a sense as what the total cost of the whole project may be? And would the $2 million cover it, or there's gonna have to be another effort to get additional resources? So those are just questions, that I would ask. And depending on how brief you can be.
I can rapid fire those. I can get you information on the Sam McDonald, the specifics, but essentially it was a hike through the park and to talk about who Sam McDonald was and the commitment that he made to conservation and making sure that that land was available for youth and for the public. With regards to the Pescadero property, yeah, we're hopeful that we can somehow manage to pull this off in that $2 million. We know that that's a steep ask. Recognizing that the plan permitting and design process is probably gonna run between 500,000 and 600,000, knowing that a restroom is a key facility and you're probably looking at another 400,000 there. So, you know, we know that there's a lot. Our hope is that we can make that work. If as we get closer to the end, it looks like that's not the case, then we're gonna have to really figure that out, and that's something that I'll have to work through with the county executive and supervisors. But $2 million is a really good start. The parcel itself is under 2/3 of an acre. You know, I think we have an opportunity. If we're really strategic about how we go about doing this. And then I would say a majority of the people who participated in the flood workshop on March 16th were not from the flood park community. In fact, a majority were from North Fair Oaks. A majority of them were kids who came with either Casa Circulo or Quran, which is a sheriff's office program. A majority of the people participating were youth and not from Menlo Park. We have the survey open. We're gonna be doing another pop-up event, or we're gonna be doing a pop-up event in North Fair Oaks to further engage with the community. And I will have a summary short, you know, when this phase of the process closes, I am happy to provide a comprehensive summary to the commission.
Yeah, I was most certainly suggest that the flood park neighborhood, whatever invitations we need to extend to them, let's make sure they do know that these things are happening, so they don't come. They just don't show up
Yeah.
at a later date when, you know, certain, not necessarily agreements, certain understandings have been established as to what's gonna happen, and you know, sort of throw the wrench into the whole process. So hopefully, you know, they're totally apprised of what's happening.
And we do send mailings out and email. I will say the community is, you know, one of the downsides of taking 10 years to doing a project is the community's tired of talking about it.
Right.
And we're seeing that. We're absolutely seeing that. People are telling us to our face, stop talking to me about it and just get it done.
Yeah, okay.
And so that's one of the downsides.
Well, that's a good feeling. If they're doing that, then that's
That's better, yeah.
That's better.
Kudos to them.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do it. Hopefully there being no other comments, we can move to the next.
Can I,
item.
just one more, and it'll be
Yeah, no
very
problem.
quick. I did want to recognize the 51 events in the last quarter. That
Yeah.
seems like a lot of outreach, and that's through the interpretive program, right? I'm assuming. Is that like, was that something that you guys had kind of set and planned? Because I remember, what was it, like several months ago, we had talked a little bit about like getting that kind of longer term interpretive kind of plan together. Is this starting to kind of go, or would we expect more events kind of coming through as you start to get going? Or is this about like the level that you're thinking about moving forward?
I mean, 51 in 3 months, right?
No, I know this one,
that's a
yeah,
lot.
yeah.
I would say this is a reflection of a few things. One, us expanding the staffing in that division.
Yep.
Us really building these authentic relationships with organizations. And us being really deliberate about engaging with schools. Will we see this trend continue? I don't know, and if I had to, you know, if I had to guess, I'd probably say no. In fact, what we're gonna see is the opposite. We're gonna see one of the things I'd like to see us do over time is fewer events, but bigger events. And I think what's driving a lot of these numbers are classroom programs. What I'd like to see is that classroom component continue. But when we're doing community events, I wanna see bigger events like Summerfest was, or like we're gonna be holding it on the coast side in Fall Fest. So fewer events, but certainly more, you know, bigger impact events.
Either way, super impressive.
Catherine and her team are remarkable.
Yeah.
Phenomenal effort. Before we move on to the next agenda item, are there any public comments on this item?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner O'Kello. I'd like to make sure that the commissioner recognize the contribution that video can make. When coupled with scientific principles of conservation and educational programs designed for formal supervised curriculum. So please put on your application form under section 13103A that money is available.
Could I just stop you there? That item is on the agenda. specifically talking about what I think you're trying to get us to. And so we'll welcome your comments at that particular time. Great, thank you. Let's go to the regular agenda. There, assuming there are no other comments, nothing.
Nope.
Okay, let's go on to the regular agenda. 6.1. Adoption of the San Mateo County guidelines for soliciting and awarding fish and game propagation funds. This is an action item. And I think our ad hoc committee is gonna lead, and I'm gonna defer to you. I'll make my comments. I'll make my
Okay.
comments.
So commissioners, within your packet is a recommendation summary from the ad hoc committee. We've had a few meetings on this and done our research by looking at what other counties do with their fish and game propagation funds. Depending on the county, they can range from unstructured to more structured. And so we called out a couple of what we thought were good examples. And for this initial round, we put in some recommendations to the staff's proposed guidelines. The areas that we would like particular feedback before we move into action are, and I'll highlight them, extending the application schedule slightly, having a discussion about the types of exemptions that should be allowable, and then how to handle the proposals around the draft work product and the educational program. Our red line recommendations are simply for this initial round. This is a unique kind of situation in that the fund is built up quite a bit. In a typical 2-year cycle, looking at past historical enforcement, right? That's where the funds come from. We typically don't see that, much. From what I could tell from the records, it was, with around $4,000 income per year, right? So what I'm trying to say is, in the future, we may have only a very small fund to give out. So keeping it simple, the interest of keeping it very transparent, very simple for the applicants as well as staff and commission to review them is the goal of our feedback for staff.
And for the.
And yeah, and for the commission.
And
So we, again, to highlight the 4 areas, just that were the biggest changes, we asked that we think the schedule should be possibly 6 weeks of open grant opportunity rather than 4. And this is particularly because even though the application is very simple, if we're trying to get educators or we're working with nonprofits that have to go through a board, approval or something, it will give them a bigger window to get those approvals happening. Do you want to take these one at a time, or do you want me to just go through them?
Let's just go through them.
Okay.
And open the discussion.
We also proposed that the review panel include at least one member of this commission, again, to kind of keep that transparency and alignment between staff and commission and our recommendations to the boards of supervisors. And that we have a single opportunity for any applicants who meet the eligibility criteria, whose applications are accepted for review, to do to speak to us in person. That would be completely optional, would not affect their scoring. We provided an example of a very short and clear form, just that's for staff to look at and see if they wanted to adopt something like that. But what we felt was important is that it would have a very clear scoring rubric. Again, transparency, so applicants know what how much effort they should put into their application, and then making sure that it's very objective when it comes through the review panel. Paragraph 6 on exemptions is where we'd like feedback. The purpose of having a set grant cycle is again, to make sure it's fair to everyone in the county that this is the window open. That being said, we understand that there are some situations, particularly because these funds are meant for habitat, endangered habitat or mitigation, where a public lands manager or some other circumstance would arise where, these funds might be needed to finish a project or needed in this very short time frame. So that is up for discussion in terms of how do you do that fairly? Again, how do you allow for those exceptions, but still follow the same process again? And the next two items, again, for the recommendations around draft work product, again, trying not to put a high barrier in front of applicants, but yet also wanting to assure that the quality of the work that will be delivered adheres with department guidelines, county guidelines, and county values. Sometimes the draft work product, again, because of the short grant cycle, may not be available. Would it be acceptable to see samples of prior work? So that, in other words, there's some way to judge the quality or the references of the applying party. And of course, since all funds are in reimbursement, there's, in the grant agreement, there's room for specifying that the subject of the final work product is at the discretion of the department. So if something goes wrong in that period, there's a remedy for that. The final area, paragraph 12, regarding educational programs, again, since the grants are not huge, we felt like 3 letters of support might be excessive, and so we'd recommend either just 1 letter of support from an official of the school that's proposing making the application, or the educator who's intended to use the product, the materials, and again, or proof of prior successful funding. Again, just a way to verify that the funds will be used in the spirit in which they're intended, but not putting the hurdles too high. Most of the other red lines are very small, and as we stated in the summary, the committee would like to continue working with staff. Let's see how this initial grant cycle goes, how many applications we actually get, and I'm sure there'll be other questions that will come up that we can then help continue to refine these guidelines, and also as we see how fast the funds get dispersed, kind of make those tweaks. So those are our summary recommendations. We can open it for commission comment.
So the only thing I would add to this is that our recommendation is that we adopt this with those changes that we are proposing. Because I think the subcommittee felt that it was really, really important that we get this train on the road, on the rails, as soon as possible. The amendment and the schedule was just to facilitate, an acknowledgement of the fact that, the 4-week window that was proposed initially, may not be fair to, certain other institutions that are actually mentioned, in the legislation. When you talk about, public education, you talk about curriculum, schools, and so on and so forth. And so we want to make it fair, to everybody. And so we are hoping perhaps we can discuss each of those items and just go through them, as quickly as we possibly can, with the intent that at the end of this, we're gonna vote on, taking this action and adopting these guidelines, and moving on. So with that, open to any comments.
I can kick it off. So first and foremost, this is great. This is way further than we had gone before. I like the fact that you were kind of leaning on maybe other institutions and how they did it, right? There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. But I think that a lot of the updates that you guys put in there were super thoughtful, and we're actually crafting it in such a way that totally made sense for for San Mateo County. Couple of the questions and these are more just like general questions, right? First and foremost, Commissioner Rodriguez-Mitten, you had mentioned something about like one commissioner or like some representation. I just wanted to get a better sense, and once again, maybe I didn't read it well enough, so if it's all laid out, thank you, and I'll just show me what paragraph it was in. But I just wanted to get a sense as to how these applications were going to be actually reviewed and kind of weighed and accepted or declined. Like, is it gonna be a mix of like park staff, board of supervisors, and maybe one person from the commission? Or what were you guys thinking in terms of like how we would adjudicate the using those funds and kind of approving or denying applications?
I'll try that.
Mhm.
So the process could be manifest in several ways. It could be entirely be a staff thing to review, to accept and review the proposals and make recommendations
Mhm.
to the commission. And the commission either agrees, disagrees, or modifies those recommendations. And the commission comes with some recommendations that are specifically be directed to the board of supervisors as to who needs to get this funding or not. So that's definitely one option.
Okay.
The other option is that I'm sure staff is gonna have a review committee.
Mhm.
Whether it's one person or it's multiple persons, staff is gonna have a review committee. And our subcommittee is suggesting that one member of this commission participate in that review committee. Yeah, actually, initially, when we were thinking about it, we were thinking of even a much larger group. We're thinking we should get somebody from, from outside as well, some other people from outside to be part of that review committee. But we decided that may be a little bit more cumbersome and it may stretch the process because, then you have to deal with other people's schedules and so on and so forth. So we agreed on just suggesting we get one commissioner be part of that review committee. They review all the proposals, come up with some recommendations. Those recommendations get presented to the full commission. The full commission deliberates on them and decides on what they're gonna recommend to the board of supervisors in terms of who we should propose.
Okay. No, and that sounds reasonable. I just didn't see it kind of enumerated here. And once
Right.
again, I know we're just trying to like
Right.
get something going, so
Right.
that's fine. I just wanted to get a little bit better sense of that. The other question I had is when I looked at the schedule, it looks like from application to reimbursement is 1 year. Is that fair?
I think that's,
And is that like a standard kind of time period from application to reimbursement or?
No,
Yeah,
is that?
is from application to get a grant agreement negotiated is 1 year. And then they have to do the project and then they get reimbursed.
Got it.
Right, so,
Okay, no, cause I just saw like the budget adopted and funds.
right, and so that we
Allocated,
say
right?
the funds are
Yeah, yeah,
allocated,
yeah.
they're not actually given to them until the project is completed.
Okay, which could probably
Yeah.
take more than.
Yes,
Yeah.
right, yeah, so I believe the end of it says within, the post evaluation is 2 years.
And is that like standard for the grant process or?
Go ahead, yeah.
Through the chair, I don't know if there is a standard for a grant process.
Okay.
It depends on the entity award. I will tell you, we applied for a grant to do fuel reduction work at Uniprocera Park in 2019, and we're still waiting to hear back. So, likewise, we put in a federal request for $1 million and we got it in a year, right? So it's, there's no standard. It really depends on the agency and the project. I think given the resources that we have
Mhm.
and the process that Commissioner Rodriguez-Mitten and Commissioner Okello laid out, I think this is pretty appropriate.
Well, and also because the fund, it feels like just kind of stays there until you use it. Like if we had to do it like, based on fiscal years or whatever, then my next question was gonna be, okay, well, do you like save it or like kind of hold it or whatever, but okay, that's fine.
Could be any other comments from other commissioners? So the schedule, let's go step by step. So item number 2, there is a schedule, okay, that is being proposed. Let's have some comment on the schedule.
Yes, but I had if it's okay, I had a question for
Yeah.
council. If that's all right, not to put you in the hot seat. But I was just curious about the approval process. If you have any guidance for that, so that we're not exposing ourselves to any unnecessary risk, in terms of making sure that everything's, transparent and equitable.
I don't know that I've spotted anything in that regard. I think that this is pretty straightforward and accomplishes, and it's consistent, that the ordinance code contemplates that the commission makes recommendations to the board, and it's ultimately the board of supervisors that makes the
Final
decision
call. Yeah.
about granting funds, and so.
So we have our discussion, at some point, the data comes to us from staff, we are.
A
able to
called down
review here.
version kind
A
of
called
comes
down.
out. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we would then get a presentation probably here at our meeting, make our recommendations to go to the board. And then they
And
make
they-
the ultimate decision.
Yeah, and I think it's, I don't know how this is entirely how this has worked in the past, but I don't think that, I don't think the board of supervisors is gonna take up a place of something on its agenda unless it has a recommendation
Exactly, yeah.
from the commission.
Got it.
That's right, and then, but it does have to go as a standalone item to the board, which I think is important. We worked through that in the past, is because one of the thoughts we had was, could it essentially just be rolled into the budget packet that goes to the board, and it cannot, it has to go as a standalone.
And the subcommittee also felt that, the public needs to be given an opportunity to come and advocate for themselves.
Yeah.
So, and so we're suggesting actually 3 times they could come and, lobby for their proposal. One time is after we accept the proposals, even before the recommendations are made. The second time, when the recommendations are made, the staff makes its recommendation, the commission discusses them, the public, the applicants have an opportunity to come to this meeting and advocate for themselves. And when it goes to the board of supervisors as a standalone item, the public also has an opportunity to go there and, and just say,
Good.
we want more money, or we think we should have gotten selected, and we were not selected. So those 3 opportunities are gonna be there.
Great.
So it's gonna be a very open
Very good.
process.
Beautiful.
Outstanding.
And so shall I take it that we agree on the schedule?
Yes.
We have no problem with the
Recommendations for the
schedule? Okay, so we can go to the exemptions.
Mhm.
The exemptions. I had a concern that I think I vocalized at this commission meeting, that, everybody should be treated equally. And that public entities should not get any exceptions, any favors, so to speak. In other words, everybody has got to align themselves with whatever process that we establish. But if we think at the same time, it's legitimate, to believe that a public agency has greater obligations to the public's welfare than perhaps a nonprofit or even an individual. And so given that fact, should we set up a process that accommodates that reality? So that if there's some work that some public agents, and it may be a department in the county that has to do, with, the public's safety being a primary concern, or whatever it is, can we accommodate a sub-process that would allow them to tap into this funding? So that's the question that we have for the commission.
So it's definitely something within boundaries. I think it's been thought out and been sat down with and discussed in thorough. And I applaud you for both commissioners for a great job on that. I didn't want to chime in because I know time is of the essence, but it is always great to know that your fellow commissioners, given what task they've been tasked with, that they come up in a quick response in this regard. So fabulous job on the both of your ends. But I agree with Chair Okello that I think we as a commission need to look at the focal point on this and see what we come up with as a recommendation or possible suggestion.
One of the concerns that I have about not allowing exemptions is that part of the code is for temporary or emergency care for wildlife. Let me find the actual code. Temporary emergency treatment and care of injured or orphaned wildlife or wildlife confiscated by the Department as evidence. So in that in case, it's like if somebody, if an, an agency said we need an extra couple thousand, we do need to have an exemption of that. I mean, that is an out of cycle request and it's a legitimate use of the funds. So I think it just, as long as we are clear about the limited scope of what those exemptions are, and we
So
that would be.
Could I press on that exemption though? So these funds are reimbursements anyways. So is it that these would need, I'm just trying to figure out what the mechanics of something of that, because it does sound like a good exemption, if anything, if there's like timeliness to it, but like, yeah, what would something like that kind of, and maybe there's been history behind that where we've had to do that before. I don't know.
Through the chair. So I think it's a great question. I think this is a phenomenal conversation, so I appreciate it. And I appreciate the attention that the subcommittee gave to this. So from a mechanism perspective, how would that work? We would in this case, it would probably be our natural resource management team that is working on it. We would pull it from one of the sub accounts, cover the cost up front, and then reimburse them with this grant fund, right? Which is the same way we would do it for any grant, right? So when we do a fuel reduction grant and we spend $200,000, we have that in our budget that we pull from somewhere else. We pay for that and then we reimburse ourselves through the grant. That's how it's structured to be. So it would be on us to find that money somewhere to do that. I think another example, and when this was originally drafted, that is one that we're actually still working through, and is we are working with the San Mateo RCD on putting essentially salmon counters in Pescadero Creek, the federally protected creek. And what we're trying to do is collect data at various points so we can understand what the movement is, understand what needs to be done from a project perspective to improve habitat and to improve the chances of repopulation. And so we had an opportunity to get a grant that had a matching obligation, but we didn't have any funds in our budget at that time that could be reallocated for that, especially where we were in the fiscal year. We ended up having to just terminate a project in order to cover those costs, which is not something that we really are excited about. The problem is these opportunities don't come up often, and we don't get to control when they come up.
Okay, so then just to put a finer point on.
That's a good example, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great example.
Right.
So to put a finer point on it, these would be, the reason why it would be out of cycle would be because of like a within fiscal year lack of flexibility, right? That we would need to do it. So it would be cases where you guys couldn't float the additional funding because, like you're saying, you're either late in a fiscal year and you don't have the money, or there's a budget crunch or something like that. Okay, got it. That makes sense.
And candidly, I think that latter one is probably gonna be something we're gonna be dealing with, over the next couple of years. It'll pop up eventually.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense as to why we would have an out of cycle, right? Because then there's no flexibility, even with the reimbursement, right, to be able to wait. Yeah.
But that scenario could also happen in a nonprofit. They've received a grant, they need a matching.
That's, yeah.
You see what
Yep.
I'm saying?
No, and that's actually why I asked the first question about a year from
Right.
the application to
Right.
reimbursement, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so nonprofits then would also be, they can come and appeal to the department and say, this is the situation that we need this money to do this, which qualifies for these funds. Okay, but we don't have the match. So can we commit to the match? So can we have, if you're gonna have exceptions, then you should probably have exceptions then, really just for everybody, not just, governmental entities.
I would agree with that.
But the other thing that we never thought about, it just came to my mind.
Just really quickly, I apologize. I agree, right, and one example is we have nonprofits that will clean creek corridors, say at Tunitas Creek Beach, right? And I think that's a great example of a nonprofit that would be tapping into these funds for appropriate projects. I think we want to just make sure we're defining that exemption enough.
Yes.
So that it's not a.
Have a big
Right.
hole.
Right.
you go.
You don't wanna drive a truck through it.
Which is why the propose that we kind of clean it up to explicitly state. We have to follow the same eligibility criteria and they have to have a clever letter.
Yeah.
That says, why is this an exemption? And that becomes part of the review packet.
Yeah.
Right.
So the other thing that just came to my mind was this. A nonprofit does work that qualifies for this. And of course, they pay for everything. Okay? And they realize, oh, these funds are available. So the project ended 2 years ago. Okay? The project ended 2 years ago. Can they come to us and say, you know what? Can we be reimbursed for this expense? And so if it was 2 years ago, you might say, probably not. But what about if it's a year? Okay, they completed the project, but now they realize this is a funding opportunity that they may not have been aware of before. Okay, and they become aware of it after the fact. Can they come after the fact and say, you know what? And still describe the project and how relevant it is to this requirement? Would that be a legitimate proposal to receive as part of this process?
That was very.
Yes, just a question.
I was gonna say,
to the
not a question,
commissioner.
I think.
No, no,
I was gonna say, I'm gonna put that back on the question.
Yeah, it's a question to the commission, it's a question to the commission. Right.
To the chair, I would suggest that we do insert it should insert a guideline that says, projects has to have been initiated within the past 2 years, right? It's a 2-year grant cycle.
Right.
So,
We put that in a clause of agreeing upon as sitting body and move forward and adopt that.
So this is gonna go back to staff. So can staff help us draft
Get that-
language that can help us address that issue? Cause we don't wanna delay
Right.
this thing. We can discuss
Get-
it and,
Get that Pablo Picasso paintbrush and pave the way for us so that we could, have something and.
I think you're looking more for a scalpel on this one. So I think what you're asking is, so add language, and I'm gonna think out loud and Craig help me with this, but essentially that says applicants are eligible for, projects that are eligible for funding include projects that are in the planning, permitting, design phase, or were implemented within or completed, I think we probably wanna use the word completed,
Right.
within the last 2 calendar years, fiscal years, 2 years from the date of when the application is due or submitted. Sorry, that's a question, I know.
That's a rhetorical question.
Oh, I guess it's more of like a throwing it against the wall and see
Right,
if
right,
you all
right,
have
right,
any
right,
questions
right,
on it.
right.
But do we
Well,
wanna be in the
Commissioner
business?
Uma has suggested 2 years.
Right, but it's just a general question of kind of the philosophy of these funds. Do we wanna be in the business of retroactive projects? I mean, the way I always viewed it was it's prospective. We're like, it's a grant process where we're saying prospectively, somebody comes up with a plan. They're interested in doing this, would we fund it? Work that hasn't been done yet. So it's a whole new concept for me to think back and say, oh, would we start reviewing projects that were already done and completed? I don't know, in my mind, I see it more as just a kind of a prospective process.
And I think that the only thing that has interjected this into the discussion is that these are reimbursements.
Yeah, exactly.
So the organization that's gonna apply, they're gonna spend their money and they're gonna get reimbursed.
But they haven't done the work.
Yeah, they've not done the work. But if they. Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with you. Most grants are prospective and don't apply to retrospective work. That being said, we've not been dispersing these funds for the past few years because we didn't process.
Right, exactly.
So maybe for this grant cycle,
Right.
we
Good point.
do accept
Yeah.
projects within the last 2 years.
Right.
I don't know if that that makes it more complicated, because if, and Commissioner O'Kelley and I both felt like these funds are public funds and we should use them.
Yeah.
But if we use them and the guidelines that staff drafted said, if the fund doesn't have at least 10,000, we're not gonna open a grant cycle because it's not worth it, which
Yeah.
totally makes sense. In future years, we probably will only have 10,000 to give away. So it's not like we're funding lots of
Yeah, right.
retrospective project. We are
No,
gonna be, it is,
understood.
yeah,
Yeah, but it would put us in a funny position, right? Let's say we get applications and we have a mixture of prospective and retroactive work.
Mhm.
And then we're in this funny situation where we're kind of biased to really support the prospective stuff, because the retroactive stuff, it's already happened,
right.
right? So we're not, in a sense, on the hook for that, even if we may want to support that, there may be really important work that we want to support. So it does put us in a little bit of a bind, I would imagine, potentially.
Through the chair, one idea you may want to consider is that as part of the evaluation process, prospective projects get there's a category where you can get an extra 5 points
Right.
for prospective projects that you're not eligible for if you've already finished, and that gives the prospective project a leg up.
Yeah.
And then what that does is if you get 20 applications and half of them are looking forward, half of them are looking back, then the ones looking forward get the priority. But if you only get 4 applications and one of them's looking forward and 3 of them are looking back, then it still gives you that flexibility.
Right.
That may be something for consideration.
Good point. Yeah. Any other discussion on this?
The in-person presentations, I like that. I think that if people are willing to come and, and present their thoughts, I think that's helpful for us because it helps us better understand, their approach and their philosophy. But I think based on like the rubric you guys were mentioning, that wouldn't necessarily change the outcome at all, which I think I guess that's fair, keeps it equitable. But on the other hand, I couldn't imagine a situation where I wouldn't be a little more swayed by an in-person, argument. So I don't know how that factors in. I mean, could we factor that in, or is that not?
That was, I think that suggestion was more just, again, to give people an equal opportunity, make sure that there wasn't a bias in reading the applications. It's like, oh, I know that name, we know that, right? And versus someone that has never applied for us before.
Understood,
We
yeah.
may want to come and say hello, put in human.
Yeah.
And also some projects may be easier to describe in person.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so
the exemption language, we're gonna count on staff to work on it, given the discussion that has taken place here, so.
So, so to confirm, we're gonna allow for exemptions, for, so we said government agencies, then we said nonprofits, but it sounds like really what we're allowing for is we're allowing for exemptions of, within, non-cycle submittals for applicants, not defining applicants, or are we saying government and nonprofit?
not defining applicants.
Not defining applicants.
All applicants.
Not defining.
Yeah, hold on.
But you are saying who can show a demonstrated need.
Right.
Doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I would add a demonstrated need that is, I'm gonna clean up the language, so bear with me, but an applicant that can show demonstrated need that is driven by factors outside of their control.
Yes,
right? So
Not just I missed the deadline.
I missed the deadline, or I really wanna get this done right now,
Uh-huh.
that's not, but
Right,
I need, we have this grant funding or this animal's injured,
Right,
that's
right,
outside of
right,
their control. So we
Right.
wanna kind of rely on that outside of their control.
right,
Yes.
right.
And then we're also gonna update it to allow applicants to be eligible if they're in the planning, permitting, design, or construction phase, as well as if they've completed the project within within 2 years of when the application is submitted, we'll say. Cause I know we didn't kind of let it, but I'm gonna
Right.
kind of
Right.
go submitted.
Yeah.
And we're only gonna do it for this cycle.
Yes.
And do we, and do we want to award or weigh applications looking forward heavier than applications looking back? That was something we didn't really land on.
We'd have to put that on that little, and I know it was just a sample, right? But
Right.
I actually really like the way that was kind of set up, so, yeah.
Adding those extra 5 points,
Yeah.
I think that.
That sums it up.
That sounds,
Sums it up.
sounds pretty.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, okay, so, for the site only, prospective projects will receive. I'm gonna say additional points to be determined, cause we may only wanna go with that
Guys are-
100 point or
Right.
5, like a
Right,
10
right,
point, where we got
right, right, right.
additional points be wanted during evaluation, okay.
So one other thing that I've also just noticed. Just reading the code. The code references the department. It seems to me they're referencing not necessarily our Parks and Recreation Department, they're referencing the fish and wildlife.
Yeah.
So for instance, they said, purchase and maintain material supplies occur for either the department's ownership and use of the department, wait a minute. Department's ownership and use, or the department's use in the normal performance of the department's responsibility. So the department that is being referenced is not necessarily the county department.
Right.
So Fish and Game can access San Mateo County funds.
I believe they can access, I think at some point it's been capped at 50%. So a portion of the funds will come to us, a portion of the funds go for them. But they have historically, they'll come to us and say, we need some money for an ATV. And this predates me, I mean, we're talking
Right.
10-15 years ago.
Right.
We need money for a new ATV to do enforcement on the coast, or the engine broke of our boat that we use.
Use a
to
new motor or
patrol.
something like that.
And they would be able to tap into those funds for those purposes.
Okay.
Again, that predates me, this is all hearsay.
So they're gonna tap into those funds before they give them to us, or they're gonna tap into those funds after they've been given to us? So we know we have 40,000, so say we want a part of your 40,000 for this particular purpose.
I think it probably depends on the circumstances.
Yeah, let's not put in too much thought until we know what money's there and it's on the table and that we know what it's gonna be made of good use or not.
Cause I would hate for their request to negate any awards that we've given before we give it, we give it out, say, okay. They've taken up all the
Yeah,
money, now
yeah.
we
That-
promised, that these people are gonna get this, but they can't, cause Fish and Game took half of it for some legitimate purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we would, once we award it, right, and that's really why it's important to have a quick turnaround between when the commission says this is what we want and when it goes to the Board of Supervisors. But once it gets committed, it's, the way I view it is it's off the table. So we have $40,000 on the table, we commit 20,000.
Yeah.
Fish and Game can come in and take 20,000 or 10,000 or whatever, but they can't take that money that's been committed.
Okay. good.
Got it.
Good to know.
And through the chair, has that happened? Have they taken fund?
Oh, committed funds or non-committed funds?
Well, just like, what's been the history of them taking,
I don't think the word take would be
or,
appropriate.
sorry,
Have
using,
used-
utilizing funds.
They've come to us and said, based on how it's been explained, they've come to us and said, hey, we need money for this, can we tap in? And we say, yeah, well, absolutely.
Is that like a yearly thing every couple of years?
It hasn't happened since I've been with the department,
Okay,
so.
there,
it hasn't
that's
happened-
what I wanted
I
to
would say as needed, as needed.
Yeah, it hasn't happened in the last.
Right.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so it is 5:15,
Yeah.
so I think we've taken care of exemptions. So the draft work product. In a sense, we also talked about it. It is,
Right, to summarize, the comments there are that we simplify this to say the applicant can submit either their draft work product or samples of related prior work. And that because the final grant award and disbursement is subject to when the project is completed, that kind of eliminates the concern that, you know, we need to review all of the product before we make the grant award. So it allows for more, again, that more proactive approach of perhaps an educator saying, well, I'd like to write a new curriculum for my class.
Correct.
Okay, then you go do it. So,
yes, in that case, we'll ask them, give us what you've done before, then look at what you've done before. Give us a sample of what we've done before, so we can get a pretty good anticipation of what, you know, what. we
Is it
sort of-
a request or a requirement, the way it's written right now? Because what if they don't have an example of a similar work, you know, maybe that we could see, you know, work they've done, but maybe it doesn't relate. Maybe this is a new area for them. Is that possible? Could be in that situation.
So if it's new for them, then how are they gonna show they sort of have the expertise
That's
to
true.
be able to deliver on the product? Then the whole thing about references may be more critical.
Yeah.
You know, that we know this person, they're capable, you know what I'm saying? There are other avenues through which you can make a fair determination.
Yeah.
Of what their ability to do.
In general, I like that concept a lot, that we have them demonstrate their, you know, their experience and prior work, because it helps us judge.
Right.
Do we want those funds to go this way?
Right. So any other discussion on draft work product?
The only thing is, as we're pulling this together, it would be great to get like an actual enumeration of, or articulation of how everything, like just what I was talking about before, which is like, is it going to be like a small group of park staff with one representative from the commission to get to that like smaller subset of kind of different projects that we would then show to like, just kind of understanding that process, I think, and somehow articulating it, I think would be helpful.
Could we move on to the educational program item 12? So do you reference your item 12 on the draft guidelines? And just read it and see whether you agree with the language that we are proposing.
This is just an additional, sorry, through the chair, this is just an additional bit of information that we'll need if it is an educational project.
Right.
Is that right?
Right. And it's just acknowledgement of the fact that, you know, educators, for instance, given the timeline, it's gonna be smack in the summertime.
Yeah.
You know, people are gone.
Yeah.
Essentially, you know, and so they may not be able to access the public officials that need to provide the reference letters and so on and so forth. What you're saying, instead of requiring 3.
Yep.
We can probably just say up to 3. So if they give
Up
us
to.
1, they meet the requirement.
Yeah.
They give us a 2, they meet the requirement. They give us 3, they meet the requirement.
One thing you may wanna say
Through the chair.
is, or proof of prior successful funding for similar work from, I would probably say either something like another government entity or a school district, right? But just specify who that funding's coming from.
Right.
If it's coming from me personally, it probably doesn't carry a whole lot of weight,
Right.
but.
From
probably just
another
prove that.
public agency. Okay.
through the chair, this, to address your point, this was also meant to kind of inform that scoring rubric, right? Because we, educational projects are very, very different from a habitat restoration where you're gonna provide us, here's the map, here's the, that's really data driven. So this is a way of kind of making sure those
Yeah.
things have a equal
Yes.
scrutiny, but also impact,
Right.
right? We may have two great educational programs where one is a classroom of 20 kids and another one is a school of 300 going on field trips. So we want a little bit more. And so this is really meant to inform kind of as staff prepares the application templates and the scoring rubric, kind of, this is what you're looking for. And this is what we'd like you to look for in those
Makes
items.
sense.
So given that, I'm ready to entertain a motion to adopt this proposed guidelines with the changes that we have discussed. I'm ready to accept. Before we do that though, let's get public comment on that. Before we do that, unless there are any other comments from the commission.
I just wanna make sure I captured really there's three changes. It's the update policy to clarify looking forward and behind. Making it clear that it's just for this cycle and that prospective projects will receive extra points. That's one change. The second change is all applicants will need, who are applying outside a cycle will need to demonstrate a need that is driven outside of their control. And then we're gonna specify that funding from another public agency.
And I think through the chair, I think you were outside, but I also would like to have some kind of articulation of kind of how we go about like the superset into the subset to what gets kind of, and I don't, once again, I don't know if that was in this or if, I just want it somewhere, right? Where we know kind of what is that part of the process, right? Including who's gonna be part of the panel that actually reviews the stuff, and then once it gets past that, then a subset will come to the commission, like that functional piece of how we plan to do it. I mean, I have the schedule here where it says applications, right? But yeah,
You would like a flow chart.
Yeah.
Basically.
or just some articulation of it.
To the chair, I think what I'm interpreting is an understanding of what the evaluation process, am I hearing that right?
Yeah, I think it's and once again through the chair, it's like the functional blocks, because up until now, I had thought that what was gonna happen was the submissions would be kind of, put in. And then we would get some here as the Parks Commission, we would get some form of like presentation of all of those, either online or offline, and then we would kind of review them. What I'm hearing, which I think makes sense, right, is that there's gonna be some subset of commissioners and park staff and others that will be evaluating the full set of the submissions. And then the commission would see like a subset of those that kind of qualified or like were like aligned and ready to be kind of recommended by the commission, and then the commission would go and provide.
So I think what you're contemplating is adding a number here, probably somewhere between 4 and 5. That specifies the process by which.
Yeah.
The basically saying that the applications will be reviewed and scored by a panel consisting of Parks Department staff and at least one.
Yeah, exactly,
Will
yeah,
then bring the recommendations
to
to the commission.
the full commission.
Which will then in turn make a recommendation.
Exactly.
to the board. So I think that you're probably, and then maybe, I think it would be between 4 and 5. When I look at this, did that make sense to?
Yes.
Yes.
You okay with that?
I am,
I mean, this is already here, like you have a section in section 2 that says, on your timeline, grant applications reviewed. And then review panel recommendation presented to full commission. That's what you're doing, you're memorializing that.
understood. What's causing me the hesitation is what the commission's functionally doing today is saying, department, go and make the changes we've told you. And once those changes are made, it's functionally an adopted guideline. Right, that's what I understand it to be, but I don't necessarily, right, so in order to make, and I think what you're specifying makes sense. But what if I go and I say, I set out what that evaluation committee is, and the commission doesn't like that, cause I haven't gotten enough guidance from the commission on what the evaluation is. So is the thought 2 commissioners and 3 members of the department? Are are you okay with whatever I come up with as long as it's 2 commissioners? I'm just looking for a little bit more guidance on how to structure that, because otherwise what happens is if I do it wrong, then we have to come back and amend it, right? And that's gonna take longer than had we just brought it, I make some changes with the subcommittee and we bring it back some. So I just wanna make sure if there's clear guidance on this tonight, I'm happy to take that and incorporate it. If not, I can kind of take a shot in the dark on this and then bring it back to the commission. I defer to the commission on this.
You know, the reason I probably don't have a problem with you doing it, because we've already suggested that there's gonna be 1 commissioner. That's gonna be part of the review committee.
Okay.
And the commission is gonna decide who that person is.
Yeah.
It's just gonna be that 1 commissioner.
One only.
Yeah. And we'll adopt this, whatever comes out of this, knowing that the ad hoc committee is gonna continue to exist.
Yeah.
So this is initially, just to make us be able to give away the 40,000 that have been sitting there for such a long time. We don't wanna delay this whole process any further. In the next 2 years, the ad hoc committee is gonna continue, the ad hoc committee and the commission is gonna continue to refine this guideline.
Yeah.
They're definitely not gonna stay the same. Yeah, they're gonna continue to refine the
Just
guideline.
using basically some teeth whitener to maybe
Yeah.
polish it better. 'Cause
Yeah,
that money's
yeah.
sitting in the
Right,
shoeboxes,
right.
Whoa.
Right.
Inflation's not helping, I'll tell you that much.
No.
So that's all great. 1 commissioner, not 2. Commission will select the commissioner. Is the commission looking to then make a recommendation for what department staff, or do you want the department head to make that? You're okay with that?
That's,
Well,
I'll get those changes. I'll get these changes.
One less
Yeah.
thing we have to,
and you know your staff better than we do.
I hope so. I mean, I spend a lot of time with them, so yeah, no, I hear
know
you.
you do.
I'll go ahead and make all those changes and get that back out to the commission as an adopted standard. for guideline.
Okay, members of the
Yeah.
public, we thank you for patiently watching us go through this painful process here. Yeah. But we'd appreciate some public comment on this, or any other public comments on this.
Oh, 1 second, sorry. All right. Mr. Kennedy, okay.
Based on my 34 years of watching committees, commissions, and board of supervisors deal with propagation fund, I don't believe you, the members of the commission, will ever know how much money you have in the kitty. I don't believe you know how much you have in there now. And I believe the board of supervisors can dip into that account for any reason at any time. So don't even bother trying to manage that money. It's been tried before, it's failed. Good luck.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you.
No, we
Thank you.
genuinely appreciate you
Yeah,
chiming
thank
in, but we don't know what, amount is in there, but your comments are always appreciative to the body.
And thank you for your patience, because you've been at several of these meetings.
And
even
several
on-
counties.
And so we appreciate your diligence and your. Okay, so then any other comments from the members of the public? If not, I'm willing to entertain a motion.
So this would be a motion to adopt the guidelines
With the
in the
change.
packet consistent with the changes that
Right.
we've discussed.
Yes. Anybody willing to make that motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt that and move to have it put in,
You just say so moved.
so moved.
Second? I'll second. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Motion carries.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you to the subcommittee for the careful work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Number I guess we're back up, sorry about that.
Moving along.
6.2.
6.2.
Amending the task commission meeting schedule to hold the May 2024 meeting at Quarry County Farm.
Bring it up to news.
Mr. Kennedy? Mr. Kennedy?
I'll be back.
Oh, okay.
Just give us background on that real quick.
Yeah, so, through the chair, during our conversation, so initially, the commission was gonna meet at Tunitas Creek Beach, next month, and when we set the initial schedule, our hope was that the project would be further along than what it is right now. Unfortunately, this weather has really delayed us from a construction. We anticipated wet weather, we anticipated rain delays. I just think this has kind of been dragging on for, a very long time. I don't think the site's gonna be in the condition that will give you a really good appreciation of what's going on there. And so what we had discussed and what I would recommend is that we switch our May and May and August, May and June meetings. We would switch our,
August.
thank you, May and August meeting to meet at Quarry Park in El Granada next month, and then Tunitas Creek Beach in August. The project will be much further along, which will give us the ability to really give you a great show and really understand what's going on from a construction and operations perspective. Also, as the commission is well aware, Quarry Park has some community-related issues that typically come up on a pretty frequent basis here at the commission. And so I think it'd be really helpful for you to get your eyes on one, the pump track there, two, talk about dogs, and three, talk about fuel reduction, and then four, talk about drainage. And so ultimately, that would be my thought for the meeting is we would meet. There is no indoor facility like the captain's house, so this is gonna be an all outdoor meeting, dress warm. But it's on the coast side, it's gonna be beautiful, and so, yeah, that's kind of what the agenda, what I'd recommend the agenda is. We first start at the pump track. From there, we talk about dogs, we'll jump into fuel reduction, and then we'll look at drainage. One other issue we may wanna consider while we're talking about all these, and it's kind of an underlying theme, is parking. Which is something that some of the neighbors have expressed concern about, so.
A quick question on that. I know there's been a couple of members of the community from that area who tend to call in on our meetings. Are they're aware of this, or will we do a little outreach to make sure they know? So I'm sure they'd love to join.
I would be more than happy to personally reach out to them and let them know.
That would be good.
I spoke with one of them last week and we had a wonderful conversation, and so yeah, I'm certainly happy to make sure that everyone is aware, and I would expect that we will have a handful of members of the public interested in participating.
Nice, be good.
I would, one last thing I say is I anticipate this would be less walking and more talking, but I think that that's okay.
Any other comments from the commission? There being none, are there any members of the public that wish to make any comments on this item? There being none, willing to entertain a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Let's go to item 6.3.
Okay.
Presentation of the county tax department fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. And this is just an informational item.
Yes, that's correct, Commissioner. I'm gonna do one thing, really apologize. Need to make sure that the public is able to see the presentation. We're gonna share that. Okay. Too many computers in front of me here, I apologize. All right. So again, here is the 24-25 fiscal year recommended budget for the Parks Department. So here's just a structure of how we're gonna go through today. We will re-highlight the budget process, which I think is important to remember, and then we'll talk about our strategic priorities, which guides how we allocate our resources. We'll talk about some of the changes that we're seeing, and then we'll go through the budget summary. So you'll see on the slide here two stars, one being the green, one being the orange. So the green star represents essentially what was last June. So when we're developing our 2-year budget. So the County of San Mateo uses a 2-year budget cycle, which allows us to actually plan a little bit longer and a little bit more strategically than if you're operating under a 1-year cycle, because under that 1-year cycle, you're just thinking about what I want to accomplish in the next 12 months. That 2-year cycle gives you the ability to look forward, which is extremely advantageous when you have multi-year projects like we do, and multi-year initiatives. And it also allows us to look forward to kind of set funds aside in larger quantities for long, big projects like Flood Park or Tunitas. And so when we are developing the 2-year budget, that's when we really do a lot of our solicitation of feedback. That's when we try and engage with the commission and we try and talk with stakeholders. Where we are right now is that orange star, which is we're making our minor modifications for our year 2 budget. So we really want to keep our changes in year 2 to a minimum and really want it just to reflect either circumstantial changes or unforeseen circumstances. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what those are. So the Parks Department, this slide is for some reason not showing up the way it's supposed to, but the department uses 3 strategic priorities to guide its decision-making in really every aspect, but certainly our biggest policy document, which is our budget. And that's facilities and infrastructure, visitor experiences, and natural resource management. And when you think about what parks are, you know, I think the first thing that jumps out is there's a lot of overlap between these 3, and that's by design, and that's really highlights how everything we do is interconnected. So our facilities and infrastructure, that's really how we're maintaining our restrooms and our shower buildings at Memorial Park, what we're doing about our water distribution systems, our sewer collection systems, our roads, our trails, how we're maintaining them as facilities, making sure they're draining properly, making sure that when someone goes to use a picnic site, the barbecue is working properly, or a campsite, they have that fire ring, they have those tables. And then one of the other big aspects for us in our facilities and infrastructure in recent years is our park-wide paving program. So we have a lot of deferred maintenance in our paving, and how are we maintaining that? Visitor experience is not just making sure we're providing the right amenities, but it's really expanding our uses. And this is something that I have made a huge priority for this department, really since joining as the director 4 years ago. And so that's, you know, how are we making sure that we're expanding for as many user groups as possible? Think dogs, think pump tracks, dog hiking, dog camping. When we're going and talking about new playgrounds and we're trying to make them as accessible and inclusive as possible, that's part of that visitor experience. And then visitor experience also includes our special events, our Summer Fest, our Fall Fest events, our Take a Hike programs, all of that. Those are, you know, how are we engaging with our visitors to make sure that, you know, here at the County of San Mateo, we use the acronym CARE, create a remarkable experience. And that's really what our visitor experience is about. And then lastly is our natural resource management, which is core to what we are and who we are as a department. And that is not just making sure that we're protecting native habitat and we're protecting the biodiversity in our system, which is hugely important, but it's also how are we reducing fuel reduction? What are we doing about erosion and coastal erosion in particular right now? That's all tied into our natural resource. We talked earlier about that, the salmon counter at Pescador Creek, right? That's part of our natural resource management. One of the coolest things that I think our natural resource management team does is there's a particular flower, it's called the coast yellow leptosiphon. And this is a flower that exists at one spot on the coast side, and that is the only place it exists in the entire world. And there was a recent development project that went in nearby, and so one of the things we're looking at is literally we're looking at our natural resource management team. I get really excited about this. Is diving into the soil composition as to where it exists currently and where can we replicate that, or where is that naturally replicated elsewhere in our system, and how can we recreate a population. And so we have identified some areas that we think are feasible, and so we're going through this process of trying to repopulate this species, right? But to think that, you know, when we talk about we're in a mass extinction period right now, but to think that there's this flower that exists nowhere else in the world, but this one spot in the San Mateo County coast.
Sure
there's-
about that?
Yeah, I'll bet my next salary or my next paycheck on it.
Oh, yeah.
So, but it's remarkable to think that, right? And so that's, I mean, what we do, you know, we think about the trails, but we don't think about that, and that's so important. So here are our budget changes. And by the way, Rolando, who's our fiscal officer is gonna be joining shortly. So Rolando, when you join, if you're on, just feel free to let us know. So as shown in the large table on the slide, there are noticeable changes from the department's preliminary recommended budget, which is coming from the left. That's gonna be the second column there. And that was approved by the board last June. So the current recommended budget represents the second year, and it really focuses on fine tuning our budget and making adjustments that were not known at the time. So that includes changes to internal service charges. So think our HR services, our ISD services. It's changes to salaries and I was gonna say legal. I mean, you're sitting right here. I don't want, but legal and I gotta say we use a lot of Craig's time, and we are very fortunate to have Craig. I hope Craig loves us as much as we love him, although I wouldn't blame him if not. And so, but that includes salaries and benefits, rollover funding for some of our capital projects, and some fund balance adjustments. So overall, you'll see that our recommended budget is about $50.5 million, which for us is remarkable. So the smaller table at the bottom of the slide is a breakdown of what that 24-25 recommended budget is. And there's really 4 separate units in there. There's Park and Rec, Fish and Game, which we just spent a significant amount of time talking about, and you'll be happy to see that we are from 40, we're actually up to about 64. And then the Coyote Point Marina and our capital projects. So as shown, the Park and Rec budget, which is really kind of one of our core funds, is at about 26.5 million. And you'll see that a large percentage of that is net county cost. We talked about the Fish and Game Fund being at about 64. One of the aspects that make us unique is our Coyote Point Marina account, which is an enterprise account. So as a reminder, the county of San Mateo and the department itself doesn't give money to the Coyote Point Marina. This is purely enterprise, meaning if you have your boat there, you pay a berth licensing fee on a monthly basis, think of it like rent, and that goes into account, and that pays for the harbor master, that pays for staff, that pays for utilities, that pays for everything. And so it's really important that the marina stays financially sustainable. And we are doing a lot of things to try and make that happen, because running a marina is getting extremely expensive. And then we have our capital projects, which is about 21 million. And a bulk of that is Flood Park and Tunitas. So the primary reason for the changes from the previous recommended budget can really be grouped into these categories. And they include salary and benefit adjustments, increases in service charges, elimination of one-time revenue and expenditures, and then it includes fund balance. And so for us, fund balance can be thought of as funds remaining from the prior year that are available to be budgeted in the current year. Per county policy, fund balance is first removed in the current level budget, and then as shown in the next bullet, it gets added back on. You're gonna have to ask Rolando why we do it that way. I would love to know why. I still don't understand it, but that's why we are fortunate to have Rolando. And so the third bullet shows our Measure K appropriations, and the board just adopted the Measure K allocations on March 26th. And the Parks Department received $5.85 million in new Measure K funds. And this helps with our ongoing operations and programs. It helps with our natural resource management, certainly helps with our capital projects and our fuel reduction as well. And then you'll see that fourth bullet is our capital projects. And right now in total, our rollover for capital is about 15.8, but again, a bulk of that is our Tunitas and Flood Park project. I think what's important to, when we look back here, I think what's important to recognize is that as we complete projects like Tunitas and Flood Park, you're gonna start seeing our budget go down. That's not a budget reduction though, and I think that's gonna be important for us to be able to convey, for us, the department to be able to convey to the commission, and us as a unit to be able to convey to the public. What's happened is because our projects have been so big, we've been squirreling money aside, knowing that we weren't gonna be able to cover 1 year's allocations. But as we spend it down, then it's gonna look like our budget's going down. It hasn't though. In fact, we've actually increased our staffing levels, which I think is really important. And so this is a summary of our recommended budget. And so this slide shows that about 42% of our total revenue is coming from other sources. And other sources are really just, if you think about it, it's one-time expenditure. So it's not something that we're gonna be getting on an ongoing basis. And so a lot of that ties back to, again, our one-time allocations for our capital projects. Taxes is gonna be the next largest revenue source, and that's about 37%. And that's essentially Measure K. And so we have our ongoing Measure K, and then we also have some one-time Measure Ks in there. And then charges for services is about 15%, and that's gonna be our marina berth rentals, our vehicle entrance fees. So our marina berth rentals is about $1.5 million. Our vehicle entrance fees is about 1.2 million. And camping and reservation fees is about 900,000, 890,000. And then intergovernmental revenue is about 4%, and that's essentially the $1 million that we're getting in federal funds for Magic Mountain.
So quick question.
Yeah.
Our relationship with the marina, they're an enterprise fund. The amount of money they collect gets reflected in our budget. If they lose money, they deal with it. Who's the they that deal with it?
When you say lose money, you mean if they see a reduction in
If
revenue?
they see a major reduction and somehow they still gotta stay afloat because we wanna keep the marina. I presume.
Pun intended. Yeah, so the marina has a reserve. They have their own reserve account that they can tap into. The marina is very effective at securing grants. If we found ourselves in a position where the marina was tapped out of financial resources and and they needed something to stay afloat, we would have to figure that out. We are nowhere near that situation right now. We are very comfortable with their financial cushion in their reserve account. But I think when you look at the marina industry throughout the Bay Area, there have been a number of marinas that have public marinas and private marinas that have shut down. And it's forcing us to really be more creative in what's happening out there. And I think bringing in, piloting a electric hydrofoil water taxi that could somehow eventually be a source of revenue is us being creative. Whatever we do at the yacht club building is us being creative. So we are trying to do everything we possibly can to make sure we don't get in that situation. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, all of the above, yeah. And so, yeah. So then we have yeah, we have our gross appropriations, and you'll see that about 15.5 million in the Park and Recreation fund, and we're looking at something like sorry. Oh yeah, no, sorry. So our other financing unit includes both our Park and Rec and then the Coyote Point Marina. So for budgeting purposes, they do get smashed together. But from an expenditure perspective, they're separate. And then our services and supplies are about 13% of our gross appropriations. The figure I want to draw attention to though is that salaries and benefits. And so that is a figure that we've seen increase because we increased our staffing levels. You'll see that on the next slide. We've been very fortunate to, in this current fiscal year, receive 6 new positions. And that does not happen for any department of our size. So we're very fortunate in that regard. And I think probably the most important takeaway.
So that's included in the 88 persons that you had in the first slide.
Yeah.
88, okay.
Yeah, so just the last thing I would draw attention to on this one though is gonna be our fixed assets, and that's gonna be our, for some of our capital projects and large equipment, so we are constantly trying to upgrade our vehicles, our fleet and some of our equipment, and so that comes out of that fixed asset. So that 88 position includes those new ranger positions, so you'll see, let me move this so you can have a better sense here. So 56 of our positions are rangers that are in the field. So that's not all of our rangers, that's just our rangers that are working in the field. So that's 56 rangers for 24 parks, 16,000 acres, 200 miles of trail. Those numbers aren't the best. They're certainly not the worst in the industry though, so I will say that. But we've, I think what I was gonna say earlier, if there's one takeaway that I want for this presentation, it's that, or one message I want to convey, is that we are in a very good spot financially, and we're in a very good spot financially because the board has been very supportive of us and the county executive has been very supportive of us. No one else was given 6 positions. So, I think that that's something that's, I really wanted to make sure that I conveyed during this conversation.
I think there's that realization that parks are responsible for quality of life in the county.
They do.
We enhance that quality of life, and so if you're doing well, then, the county of San Mateo is always gonna remain attractive.
I think so. I would agree with that. And we serve countywide, right? I mean, that's the big thing is we do serve countywide. Really quick, you'll see our maintenance unit is 7 positions. That has a couple of ranger positions in there as well. 5 right now, to be specific. And then our capital projects manager is technically a ranger as well. And we have 2 rangers in our visitor services division, right? So our ranger total is more than 56. We're really more in the low 60s. And we have, at this point, 3 vacancies in our ranger classification. And then our Coyote Point Marina has 3 full-time employees. We have 1 planner. Our natural resource management team is up to 5 full-time employees. We also have 1 extra help term employee that's not shown up on here, but he is an arborist and he's responsible for putting together the hazard tree mitigation program that we're doing. And he's been a great addition to this department. Excuse me. And then administration is, people like me and Hannah and Scott. So, and our so our recommended budget, as I mentioned before, the Parks Department's new Measure K allocation totals $5.85 million. And we've seen this recent kind of switch in how our Measure K is being utilized. And so if you were to look historically, you're gonna see it get kind of wonky right now. And the reason for that is a couple things.
Minutes.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Really quickly, so we received $1 million in funding for fuel reduction. And then we used to fund our parkades with Measure K, and we've now moved that to general fund. So this was a huge pot that we were pulling from to pay for parkades. That's now getting funded differently. And as a result, we saw a reduction in our Measure K, but we saw a corresponding increase in our general fund, in our net county costs, right? So, so just something to kind of pull up, kind of draw your attention to there. And then you asked earlier about the Coyote Point, how are we gonna fund that effort? Our Coyote Point modernization project, it shows 1.8 there. So that's essentially how we would go about funding in addition to our $1 million. Some of that money has been allocated to specific work in Coyote Point. So, I think we really are looking more like $1.5 million for whatever our modernization efforts are, which is not a little amount of money, right? And then parkwide paving, I talked about earlier about addressing our deferred maintenance, and that's what that parkwide paving program is. And then PRKOP is just, that's our operational account. So when our water lines break, our sewer lines break, when we need to fix a roof on a restroom, when we have to remove some hazard trees, all of that's gonna come out of our PRKOP account. And so you have our recommended, you kind of have how this is all broken out right here. And I'm gonna go ahead and jump to the question section, recognizing that the sheriff's office is gonna
Arrest us.
Yeah. So,
You didn't have to say it this time. It was the sheriff that.
Somehow we listened.
Yeah,
Sheriff said
yeah.
there we go. And Rolando's on, so he is happy to answer any questions you have, as am I.
I've never asked this question before. Do departments have a rainy day fund?
We have a reserve. We do have a reserve. We have a county policy on what the minimum is. Rolando has done a phenomenal job building our reserves. And when I say that, it's not just because he's on it. When he joined the department, our reserves were not where they needed to be. He's done a great job building it. We're somewhere about a $2.5 million reserve account right now.
2.5.
Million.
Okay, so there could be multiple ice cream dips into that. Or
We try not to. Yeah, I
No,
mean,
but-
ultimately, our goal is to not touch that. But if something were to happen, then yeah, we'd be able to.
Yeah, like, last year, the rains, the fires, all of those things,
Those are,
Yeah.
more and,
Who says when they could be touched?
So ultimately, I would be the one who would make that request to the Board of Supervisors, and the board would have to approve that.
Okay.
But we all have to answer to Rolando when it comes to money.
Oh,
So it would be good to get the PowerPoint, if you could send that to us.
Yep.
And I think that would be very.
Happy to.
informative, because you're so, it was good listening to you. We couldn't, our fingers couldn't take any notes.
No, I talk fast. I talk fast. And also get animated, so
Okay.
I'll send that out to you all.
Okay, so perhaps what we'll do is go to the public, see any comments from the public.
Those are all parks staff, so you're good.
So
participants, so.
any comments from the commission?
No, thank you for the
That's it.
information. Good
Yeah, so
overview.
thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Since it was an informational item. A great pleasure, so. Motion to adjourn,
Second,
Sheriff, you there this?
I look forward to seeing everybody at the